I have mentioned this now a couple of times, and I just need to mention it in passing, bracket it, to build the point I think needs to be built, and that is that the Biden administration is telegraphing its response to the Iranian proxies in Iraq and Syria and has given them enough lead time to remove their generals, agents, Iranian officials who are coordinating with the proxies and get them out of the way. At the same time, they're clearly peddling a talking point. It's now appearing in Politico, the New York Times, and elsewhere that the Iranians do not control their proxies. And this is Joe Biden's spin to the public, to the low information voter, that they're not going to deal with Iran, they're going to deal with the proxies. Do you know why the proxies exist? The proxies exist because Iran wants plausible deniability, and the Biden administration thinks you're all stupid. What Iran does is it builds up, trains, and funds the proxies who share their worldview. And then they step away and they give general advice, guidance, and oversight. And then they can say, well, it's not us, it's the proxies. We don't control them. Well, the whole reason you built the proxies was so that they would do what you want and know what you want without you having to tell them on a daily basis so that your signal intelligence is not intercepted. The proxies operate on their own with your blessing on your behalf and with your money. It is the Iranians in a hands-off way doing these things. And what the Biden administration has done is it has decided to target just the proxies, but give enough lead time for all of the Iranian personnel to leave. Now, think about this. In Vietnam, what happened in Vietnam? In the beginning, it was the South Vietnamese, and we sent in advisors who guided the South Vietnamese, who were what? Our proxies against the communists. Iran's doing the same thing. They have advisors in the area advising the proxies, but they're technically hands-off. And what Joe Biden has done is he's given enough announcement to Iran of where we're going to strike, the type of targets we're going to strike, who we're going to strike, and when we're going to strike, that the Iranians have been able to pack up and leave and get out of Dodge. So the facilities we hit will be mostly empty, and the people that we should be killing will be spared. We've seen this before. And you don't have to go back to Vietnam. All you have to do is go back to the Clinton administration, where the same sort of people doing the same sort of thing. The Khobar Towers were bombed in 1996. The USS Cole, let me look up, it was in 2000. This was during the Clinton administration. The Clinton administration lobbed a few missiles, blew up a few buildings, gave adequate notice, killed a few goats. And the Khobar Towers, which came, by the way, after the first World Trade Center bombing. You had the first World Trade Center bombing, and then you had the Khobar Towers, and then you had the USS Cole. And every time the United States engaged in a proportionate response, here is the review from Wikipedia. Yet I realize it is Wikipedia. President Bill Clinton declared, if, as it now appears, this was an act of terrorism, it was a despicable and cowardly act, and we will find out who was responsible and hold them accountable. On the 19th of January 2001, the U.S. Navy completed and released its investigation of the incident, concluding the Cole's commanding officer acted reasonably in adjusting his force protection posture based on his assessment of the situation that presented itself when the Cole arrived in Aden in Yemen to refuel. They concluded the commanding officer of the Cole did not have the specific intelligence-focused training, appropriate equipment, or on-scene security support to effectively prevent or deter what happened, and recommended changes to Navy procedure. In Afghanistan, the bombing was a great victory for bin Laden. Al-Qaeda camps filled with new recruits, and contributors from the Gulf states arrive with petrodollars. There was no significant response. The Navy began reassessing its anti-terrorism mission. And ultimately in 2002, under the Bush administration, we were able to kill the man identified as the lead suspect in the plot. The World Trade Center bombing of 1993 ultimately led to the Khobar Towers bombing. After the Khobar Towers bombing, done by Al-Qaeda, it led to the Cole. After the Cole, it led to 9/11. This is from the Khobar bombing. It was Al-Qaeda that was attributed the Khobar Tower, but Iran was involved. Within days of the blast, counterterrorism officials on President Clinton's National Security Council concluded that elements inside Iran, specifically the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, were the perpetrators. They put pressure on the president and his national security advisor, Sandy Berger, to take action. They were joined by others inside and outside the administration, notably FBI Director Louis Freeh and New York columnist Tom Friedman. Before taking action, Clinton insisted on proof that could stand up in both a court of law and the court of public opinion. In the meantime, he ordered a review of military options in case of a decision to punish Iran. By the time Saudi Arabia and the FBI concluded their investigations, Iran had elected a new president, Mohammad Khatami. Khatami surprised the international community by urging dialogue of civilizations within the West in order to overcome almost 2 decades of animosity. Clinton, who had initially taken a stand toward the Islamic Republic, including imposing major economic sanctions on the country, reversed his thinking in hopes that Khatami potentially represented a game change. The prospect of opening with Iran, which intrigued U.S. allies and domestic critics of the administration, drove Clinton's response to the Khobar Towers. The White House and State Department sent various signals to the Iranians, some of which they reciprocated, but ultimately hopes for significant improvement remained unfulfilled. There really was no significant response to the Khobar Towers, and Iran was complicit in helping Al-Qaeda do it. Here we are. Iran is using the Houthi to fire missiles at American warships in the Red Sea. Iran's proxies are firing missiles at and killing American soldiers in the Middle East. And the response of the Biden administration, who has, by the way, been thoroughly infiltrated by Iranian agents, sympathizers, and spies, including at the Department of Defense, and it is well documented, and there has been no press outrage at the number of people who are sympathetic to Iran inside this administration, possible collaborators, and possibly compromised. There's no major outrage in the media about this, and the Biden administration's response is to tell Iran how long they've got, where they're attacking, what they're going to attack. This is the Clinton administration all over again, but on steroids. Meanwhile, the FBI is warning about possible terrorists coming across our border. They have caught people from Syria, from Iran, from Iraq, from Jordan, from Afghanistan, from Pakistan, from Uzbekistan, from Tajikistan, from Turkmenistan. They have caught people from all over the Middle East coming across our border. That's the ones they've caught. We know there are plenty of getaways, plenty of gotaways, plenty of people who got away from officials. I bet you there are Iranian proxies here right now. That's not speculation. That's informed by what the FBI director himself is publicly saying, and yet the Biden administration won't even secure the border. The Biden administration is telling everyone, well, I don't have the power. I can't actually secure our border unless Congress acts, which is garbage. It's nonsense. It's horse manure. Texas is securing the border, and Biden's trying to stop them from securing the border. You want to know a fun fact? Border crossings in Texas have gone down, and they've gone up in Arizona, New Mexico, and California. The mass wave of humanity is moving to those states because they can't get across the razor wire in Texas. Turns out the Texas Border Patrol and Texas National Guard have found a way to secure the border without Joe Biden, and he's upset about it. I have a serious question. How many Americans are going to get killed because of Joe Biden and his administration? How many Americans are going to be murdered by terrorists because of Joe Biden? That's what happened when Clinton refused an aggressive response of the Khobar Towers and the USS Cole. Al-Qaeda and Iran together complicitly, and we know Iran was involved in helping people from Al-Qaeda with 9/11. They struck on 9/11 and the World Trade Center collapsed, and they attacked the Pentagon, and thankfully the passengers took over the plane in Pennsylvania and crashed it before it flew into the Capitol. All Joe Biden is doing is signaling American resolve has gone away. The pattern is Iranian involvement in the Khobar Towers, Iranian involvement in the USS Cole, Iranian involvement in 9/11, Iranian involvement with the Houthi, Iranian involvement with the proxies in Iraq. And the best the media in the United States can do is carry Joe Biden's water and say, well, Iran's not really complicitly involved with them, or Iran is not really. They can't really control them. Yes, they can. They can cut off their funding. They can cut off their training. They can cut off their access to Iranian personnel who undoubtedly have been there helping them, just as we were in South Vietnam in the 1960s, just as we have done around the world. Joe Biden is signaling our weakness, and it's going to get Americans killed. 3 American soldiers died in Jordan. The limp-wristed response of the Biden administration is going to encourage the Iranians more. If you do not punch Iran, and you don't have to even attack domestically Iran, but you have to stop signaling your advance attacks and just blow stuff up, blow them up, kill them all in Iraq, go after them. And Joe Biden won't do that. He's doing what the Clinton administration did, and that led to 9/11, and he's doing what the Kennedy and Johnson administrations did, and that led to all-out war in Vietnam. Joe Biden is going to get a lot of Americans killed because Joe Biden is a strong-talking coward. Joe Biden talks loudly, and he carries a limp stick around. How many Americans are going to die? And you know, the sad, tragic irony here is that it's probably going to be the next administration where the casualties come. And the Democrats will quickly pounce and blame that administration. Remember, many of them blamed George Bush, who was on the job 8 months when 9/11 happened. They said, well, it's his fault. You can't blame Bill Clinton. And we know historically all the plotting, all the planning was inspired by the Clinton administration's weak responses to Al-Qaeda and Iran during his administration, and the planning began well before George Bush became president. If Donald Trump becomes president in 2024 and an attack happens in 2025, you know and I know the entirety of the American media will blame Donald Trump and say it's blood on his hands, when really this is the Biden administration's fault. The Biden administration is inspiring it. How many Americans are going to get killed because of the Biden administration and their internally compromised relationship with Iran?